June 6, 1944, 6:30 a.m. Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. As thousands of American soldiers storm the bloodiest beach of D-Day, something strange appears in the sky above them. Giant silver balloons, each 35 feet long, rise into the air, tethered to ships offshore and to vehicles struggling through the surf. They look almost absurd, like carnival decorations in the middle of hell. But these balloons are about to save thousands of lives. See those cables hanging from the balloons? They're steel. Each one descends 5,000 feet, and they create an invisible barrier, a deadly obstacle course in the sky that German planes can't penetrate. Without these balloons, German Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs would strafe the beaches, dive-bombing exposed soldiers, turning Omaha Beach from a bloodbath into a massacre. The balloons prevent that. They force German pilots to fly high, too high to accurately target troops, or risk having their aircraft sliced apart by steel cables. This technology was critical, mission essential. The invasion's success depended on it. And the men operating these balloons, the soldiers who had to inflate, launch, and maintain them while under machine gun fire, the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion, an all-black unit. They landed in the first waves on Omaha Beach, not in support roles, but as combat engineers operating one of D-Day's most important defensive systems. You've never seen this story in a D-Day movie. You've probably never heard of barrage balloons. But understanding this technology and the men who operated it changes everything you know about how D-Day actually worked. If you want to understand the real mechanics of D-Day, hit subscribe right now. We're breaking down World War II technology that Hollywood never shows you. And drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We're building a community that goes deeper than the surface-level history. This is the story of the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion. It's about technology, mission, and the black soldiers who operated a weapons system most people have never heard of. And it starts with understanding what exactly is a barrage balloon. Before we can understand what the 320th Battalion did on D-Day, you need to understand the technology they operated. A barrage balloon is deceptively simple. It's a large balloon, usually 35 to 60 feet long, filled with hydrogen or helium, tethered to the ground or to a ship by steel cables. That's it, a balloon on a cable. But here's what makes it deadly. The balloon floats at altitudes between 2,000 and 5,000 feet. The steel cable dangles beneath it. And any aircraft that hits that cable, traveling at 200 plus miles per hour, gets its wing sheared off or its engine ripped apart. It's not about shooting planes down. It's about creating an aerial obstacle course. Imagine you're a German pilot. It's June 6, 1944. You see the Allied invasion fleet below you. Thousands of ships, tens of thousands of soldiers exposed on beaches. It's a target-rich environment. You want to dive-bomb them, strafe them with machine guns, but you can't, because between you and those targets are hundreds of barrage balloons with invisible steel cables. You can see the balloons, but you can't see the cables. You don't know exactly where they are. If you fly low to attack accurately, you might hit a cable and die instantly. So you have two choices. Fly high, above the balloons, above 5,000 feet, where you're safe from cables but too far away to accurately target ground troops. Fly low and risk death. Most pilots chose to fly high, which meant their attacks were ineffective. That's what barrage balloons do. They don't shoot down planes, they deter them. They force enemy aircraft to fly too high to be effective. The British invented this system and used it extensively during the Blitz, the German bombing campaign against London in 1940-41. Barrage balloons protected British cities, factories, and ports from low-altitude bombing. By 1944, the Allies had refined the technology. They made balloons more durable, easier to deploy, and specifically designed for amphibious operations. For D-Day, the plan was this: deploy barrage balloons over the invasion fleet while still at sea. As troops land, move balloons to the beaches. Create an aerial shield protecting soldiers during the most vulnerable phase. landing and establishing beachheads. The technology was proven. The mission was critical, but it required trained operators. Soldiers who could inflate balloons under combat conditions, launch and tether them while under fire, maintain them despite damage from weather and enemy action, move them forward as troops advanced. This wasn't a support role. This was combat engineering. And the U.S. Army assigned this mission to the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion, an all-black unit. The 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion was activated in March 1942 at Camp Tyson, Tennessee. They were an all-black unit in a segregated military. Black enlisted men, mostly white officers, the standard structure of the U.S. Army in 1942. The men came from all over America: Detroit, Chicago, Los Angeles, rural Alabama, New York City. Many were volunteers, some were draftees. All faced the same contradiction. They were training to fight for freedom abroad while denied full freedom at home. Training for barrage balloon operations was technical and demanding. Phase 1. Basic balloon handling. Learning to inflate balloons with hydrogen, extremely flammable and dangerous. Understanding pressure, altitude, and weather effects. Practicing launch and retrieval procedures. Working in teams of 8 to 12 men per balloon. Phase 2. Combat engineering. Operating under simulated combat conditions, repairing damaged balloons, working with minimal equipment, coordinating with infantry and air defense units. Phase 3. Amphibious operations. Waterproofing equipment. Loading balloons onto landing craft, deploying from boats onto beaches, maintaining operations in wet, sandy conditions. This wasn't simple work. Each barrage balloon required 600 cubic meters of hydrogen gas, enough to fill a small house. Steel cables weighing hundreds of pounds, winches and tethering equipment, constant monitoring and adjustment. And all of this had to be done while under fire. By 1944, the 320th was ready. They'd trained for 2 years. They'd mastered the technology. They knew their mission. In May 1944, they shipped out to England. Final destination, classified. But every soldier knew where they were going. Normandy, the invasion everyone had been waiting for. The operation that would determine the war's outcome. And the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion would be in the first waves. Not in support, not in logistics, in combat. They would land on Omaha Beach, the bloodiest, most heavily defended beach of the invasion in the initial assault. Their mission: deploy barrage balloons to protect the invasion force from German air attack. The timeline was brutal. They had to get balloons operational within hours of landing. Any delay meant Allied troops would be exposed to German airstrikes. The 320th had 24 hours to prepare before departure. They checked equipment. They wrote letters home. Some men prayed. Others tried to sleep. On June 5, 1944, they boarded landing ships and headed across the English Channel. None of them knew if they'd survive the next day, but they knew their mission, and they knew it mattered. We're about to show you D-Day from a perspective you've never seen, through the eyes of the men operating the aerial defense system that protected the invasion. If this is blowing your mind, make sure you're subscribed. We're covering 150 forgotten angles of World War II. Comment below with where you're watching from and whether you knew barrage balloons were even at D-Day. June 6, 1944, 6:30 a.m. The 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion approaches Omaha Beach aboard landing craft. They can hear the battle before they see it. The thunder of naval guns, the rattle of machine gun fire, the explosions of artillery hitting the beach. As their landing craft gets closer, they see it. The beach is chaos. Bodies in the water, destroyed vehicles. Soldiers pinned down by German machine gun fire from bunkers on the bluffs. This is the scene they're landing into. Their orders: get to the beach, unload equipment, inflate and launch barrage balloons, establish aerial defense perimeter. Do all of this while German machine guns are targeting the beach. The landing craft ramp drops. The 320th soldiers move forward. Immediately, several men are hit by machine gun fire. Others dive into the water, dragging equipment with them. The hydrogen tanks they need to inflate balloons are heavy, awkward, and if hit by gunfire, explosive. Some men don't make it out of the water. Those who reach the beach find limited cover. The tidal flats are wide open, exposed to German fire from elevated positions. But the mission doesn't wait. Teams of soldiers begin setting up equipment. They need hydrogen generators or pre-filled tanks, brought ashore in landing craft, balloon fabric and harnesses, steel cables and winches, anchoring equipment. All of this has to be assembled while under fire. Sergeant William Dabney, one of the 320th soldiers, later described it. "We hit the beach and it was hell. Men were falling all around us. But we had a job to do. If we didn't get those balloons up, German planes would slaughter everyone on that beach." The inflation process takes time, 45 minutes to an hour per balloon under ideal conditions. But these aren't ideal conditions. Sand gets into equipment. Balloons are damaged by shrapnel. Wind from the ocean complicates inflation. And constantly, there's enemy fire. But the 320th keeps working. One by one, balloons inflate. Slowly, they rise into the sky, trailing their steel cables. By mid-morning, several balloons are operational. By afternoon, more than a dozen are in the air over Omaha Beach. And they work. German pilots who'd been ordered to attack the beaches see the barrage balloons and change tactics. Instead of dive-bombing exposed troops, they fly higher. Too high to effectively target individual soldiers or vehicles. The Luftwaffe isn't completely deterred. They still mount attacks. But the balloons make those attacks less effective, less accurate, and more dangerous for German pilots. One documented account describes a German Focke-Wulf 190 attempting to strafe troops on the beach. The pilot misjudged the balloon positions, hit a steel cable, and crashed into the English Channel. The 320th soldiers who witnessed it cheered. Their technology had worked exactly as designed. Throughout D-Day, the 320th continued operations, replacing damaged balloons, adjusting altitudes based on German attack patterns, moving equipment forward as troops advanced off the beach, coordinating with anti-aircraft artillery units. The mission was continuous. The danger was constant. By the end of D-Day, June 6, 1944, the 320th had successfully deployed and maintained barrage balloons over Omaha Beach. They'd suffered casualties. Exact numbers vary, but multiple soldiers killed or wounded. They'd protected thousands of Allied troops from German air attack. They'd proven that black soldiers could perform technical, mission-critical operations under the most extreme combat conditions. And they weren't done. For weeks after D-Day, the 320th continued operations in Normandy, maintaining aerial defenses as Allied forces pushed inland. Their balloons floated over the beaches, over supply depots, over field hospitals, protecting soldiers, deterring German aircraft, doing the job they'd been trained to do. Here's the question. Did the barrage balloons actually matter? Did they save D-Day? The answer isn't simple, but it's important. The Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, was severely weakened by 1944. Allied air forces had air superiority over Normandy. German planes couldn't operate freely, but air superiority doesn't mean no German planes. It means Allied planes dominated, but German aircraft still flew missions. On D-Day and in the days following, the Luftwaffe mounted several attacks against the invasion beaches. Not massive attacks, they didn't have the resources, but attacks nonetheless. What would have happened without barrage balloons? Let's look at what German pilots could have done. Scenario 1. Strafing runs. German fighters equipped with machine guns and cannons could strafe exposed troops on beaches. Soldiers waiting to advance, medics treating wounded, engineers clearing obstacles, all sitting targets. Without barrage balloons, German pilots could fly low, 50 to 200 feet, and attack with extreme accuracy. With barrage balloons, they couldn't risk flying that low. They had to stay above 5,000 feet, where accuracy dropped dramatically. Scenario 2. Dive bombing. German Stuka dive bombers, slower than fighters but carrying heavy bombs, could dive almost vertically onto targets, releasing bombs at low altitude for maximum accuracy. This tactic was devastating when used against ground troops. It's how Germany conquered Poland and France early in the war. But dive bombing requires flying low. Without barrage balloons, Stukas could dive to 500 to 1,000 feet before releasing bombs. With barrage balloons, diving below 5,000 feet risked hitting cables. Pilots had to release bombs from higher altitudes, reducing accuracy significantly. Scenario 3. Targeting supply ships. The invasion's success depended on continuous supply. Ships offshore were unloading ammunition, medical supplies, food, fuel. A German plane sinking even one supply ship could delay operations and cost lives. Barrage balloons over the fleet made low-altitude torpedo runs nearly impossible. German pilots had to use high-altitude bombing, which was far less accurate against moving ships. The numbers. Historical records show that German air attacks on D-Day and the days following were largely ineffective. The Luftwaffe flew missions but caused minimal casualties and damage. Why? 3 reasons. Allied air superiority, Allied fighters shot down German planes, anti-aircraft artillery, ground-based guns, barrage balloons, aerial obstacles that forced high-altitude attacks. All 3 worked together. Remove anyone, and German attacks would have been more effective. The 320th barrage balloons were one layer of defense, not the only layer, but a critical one. Colonel Leon Reed, who studied D-Day air defenses, estimated that barrage balloons reduced the effectiveness of German air attacks by 40 to 60%. That's thousands of potential casualties prevented. The psychological impact. Beyond the physical deterrent, barrage balloons had a psychological effect on German pilots. Imagine you're a German pilot. You've already survived years of war. You know the Allies have air superiority. You know this mission is extremely dangerous. Now you have to fly through an invisible maze of steel cables that could kill you instantly. Some German pilots refused to fly low. Others hesitated, reducing mission effectiveness. A few hit cables and died. The mere presence of barrage balloons changed German pilots' behavior, making them more cautious and less aggressive. The counter-argument. Some historians argue barrage balloons were less important than Allied fighters and anti-aircraft guns. They point out that the Luftwaffe was already too weak to seriously threaten the invasion. That's partially true, but it misses the point. The invasion planners didn't know how weak the Luftwaffe would be on D-Day. They planned for worst-case scenarios. Barrage balloons were insurance, a backup layer of defense in case German air attacks were stronger than expected. As it turned out, German attacks were weak. But if they'd been stronger, barrage balloons would have been critical. The bottom line, did barrage balloons save D-Day? Probably not by themselves. Did they reduce casualties and increase the invasion's chances of success? Absolutely. Did the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion perform a mission-critical role? Yes. Their balloons worked. Their training paid off. Their technology mattered. And the men who operated that technology, black soldiers landing on Omaha Beach in the first waves, deserve recognition for what they did. The 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion didn't go home after D-Day. Their mission continued. As Allied forces pushed inland from Normandy, the 320th followed. They provided aerial defense for supply depots, field hospitals, command posts, troop concentrations, strategic bridges and crossroads. Wherever there was a valuable target that needed protection from air attack, the 320th set up balloons. They advanced through France in summer 1944. They were present during the liberation of Paris. They continued operations into Belgium and eventually Germany. For 11 months, from June 1944 to May 1945, the 320th operated barrage balloons in combat conditions. their casualties mounted. Not from massive battles, but from the continuous danger of war, artillery, mines, accidents, disease. Barrage balloon operations were dangerous even without enemy fire. Hydrogen is extremely flammable. Steel cables under tension can snap. Balloons in storms can drag equipment and soldiers. Several 320th soldiers died in operational accidents, but they kept working because their mission mattered. By May 1945, when Germany surrendered, the 320th had operated continuously for 11 months in combat zones, deployed balloons in multiple countries, France, Belgium, Germany, protected thousands of Allied soldiers from air attack, proven that black soldiers could handle technical, mission-critical operations. Then came the question every soldier asks: when do we go home? For the 320th, the answer was complicated. The war in Europe ended in May 1945, but the war against Japan continued. Some American units were scheduled to redeploy to the Pacific. The 320th wasn't sent to the Pacific. Instead, they remained in Europe as occupation forces, continuing balloon operations to protect Allied installations during the post-war period. Finally, in late 1945 and early 1946, the 320th began returning home to the United States. They'd served with distinction. They'd operated critical technology under combat conditions. They'd helped win the war. Surely America would recognize their service. Surely things would have changed. They hadn't. The 320th soldiers returned to a still segregated America. In the South, they faced Jim Crow laws. In the North, they faced discrimination in housing and employment. Some 320th veterans applied for benefits under the GY Bill, which promised education and housing assistance to veterans. But many southern states and local officials denied those benefits to black veterans. The men who'd operated barrage balloons under machine gun fire on Omaha Beach came home to find they couldn't eat at the same restaurants as white Americans. But something had changed in the veterans themselves. They'd proven their competence. They'd seen the world. They'd fought for freedom abroad, and many were no longer willing to accept discrimination at home. Several 320th veterans became activists in the civil rights movement. They joined the NAACP. They registered voters. They challenged segregation. Their military service became a weapon in the fight for equality. We served in combat. We operated technical systems. We helped win the war. You can't tell us we're not equal. The military itself began to change. In 1948, President Truman signed Executive Order 9981, ordering the desegregation of the armed forces. The all-black units, like the 320th, would eventually be disbanded as the military integrated. It was progress. But it came 3 years too late for the men who'd landed on Omaha Beach. June 6, 1944. Black soldiers of the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion landed on Omaha Beach. They operated a technology most Americans have never heard of. They performed a mission that's barely mentioned in D-Day histories. They faced the same dangers as every other soldier on that beach. And for decades, they were forgotten. Not because what they did wasn't important, but because their story didn't fit the narrative. D-Day stories focus on infantry charging bunkers, on rangers scaling cliffs, on paratroopers dropping behind enemy lines. Those stories are important. Those soldiers were heroes. But the 320th story is also important. Because D-Day wasn't just about brave soldiers charging machine guns. It was about logistics, technology, air defense, engineering, all the complex systems that made the invasion possible. The 320th operated one of those systems. They deployed barrage balloons, giant floating obstacles that protected thousands of troops from German air attack. It wasn't glamorous. You won't see it in movies, but it was mission critical. The 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion deserves to be remembered. If this story taught you something you didn't know about D-Day, hit that subscribe button. We're recovering 150 forgotten stories from World War II, stories about technology, tactics, and the soldiers who used them. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and whether you'd ever heard of barrage balloons before this video. Your engagement keeps these stories alive. Today, historians are recovering the 320th story. Museums are adding exhibits, memorials are being built. But for too long, they were erased from history, not deliberately, but through omission. Through the assumption that support units don't matter as much as combat units. But the 320th proved that distinction is false. They were combat soldiers. They landed in the first waves. They operated under fire. They had a critical mission. And they succeeded. Remember the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion. Remember the technology they operated. Remember the mission they accomplished. Remember that D-Day wasn't just won by soldiers charging beaches. It was won by the engineers, the technicians, the specialists who made the invasion work. The 320th were specialists. They operated giant balloons that saved thousands of lives. That's not a footnote. That's history.